let me just say, I'm in Brazil right now, and I mentioned the Bahamas,
You are.
and people's eyes light up, right? And this is South America. They claim, in Rio, they claim about the beaches, but when I mention the Bahamas, they're like, oh, those are real beaches. And I'm like,
Yeah.
those are real beaches. We talk about crystal clear waters, and I pull out my phone and I show them, my trip to Exuma and what, what true ocean beauty looks like. They're amazed. I think the Bahamas has a great reputation. I mean, it's known as paradise for most people, right? Just my perspective. But I'm not sure. And I think even on the sports side, I mean, we're one of very few countries within sports. I mean, I think somebody posted something a few years ago when we had the first round draft pick of the NBA go. And they pointed out that the Bahamas, a country, possibly approximately 400,000 people, have had 2 first-round draft picks in the NBA Finals. And China, which has got 1 billion people, has got 1. And when we talk about those percentages, and we look at how Bahamians are performing at very high levels throughout, Mr. Smith can attest to this, his kid can attest to it. I mean, we have a very strong, very, very strong and positive name throughout the world. I think we just need to give it a little bit more promotion. And in certain areas, I'd like for us to have more of an intellectual name. Intellectual, reputation. I think Sidney Poitier has helped a lot with that, and I'm not sure if anybody has watched the Oprah's documentary that she did that's on Apple TV about Sidney Poitier's story. It's a tremendous one, and I think it really shines on the Bahamas and its growth, showing from whence he came to the levels that he was able to achieve as a result of that Bahamian upbringing.
Let's hear the other panelists here about your perspective and the perception of other people on the Bahamas and the development of our country.
I'll just chime in and just to piggyback on Mr. Saunders. Yes, I think when you say the name Bahamas, everybody registers the sun, sand, and sea. So I think we have dominated that industry for such a small country. But when I tell the story of the Bahamas, I throw in a little flavor because you gotta. By the time I tell the story, people go, "Oh, I want to go see that," because I speak of not only the neighborhoods and all their differences and how the culture has evolved, not only about the heritage and the roots of Junkanoo, rake and scrape, and those kinds of expressions that we have, but I talk about the brands and the industries that we have. I mean, when you say the name Lowe's Pharmacy, you know what that means. When you say Oriental Cleaners, you know what that means. But those businesses were built by families. And so the United States has the greatest brand in the world because they are able to tell a fuller story about themselves. And so what I think we are a little bit lacking on is, yes, that we have ridden it's better in the Bahamas train for tourism, but we don't tell the same story about the culture, the families, the businesses, the industry that deserve the same sort of spotlight, because I think that reflects our intellect. It reflects some of the rigor in our educational system. When I first got to college, I was like, this is it. This is all you do? Multiple choice? That's it? This is the answer. It's on the paper. I just couldn't believe it. I talk about the not only the K through 12 educational system, but how we are trying to grow from college to university system. And these are challenges that are happening in real time, but we're doing it. And we don't have the population that a lot of other Caribbean countries have, because sometimes they can grow industries simply because they have millions of people. We're doing it with hundreds of thousands of people. And you got to take out of the 400,000, the kids, those that are retired. So you have a very smaller group of productive people, but yet we are powering through with building industry. And so when I tell that story, people say, okay, I want to visit, but I want to visit someone in my profession. I want to visit someone who built a business. I want to visit someone who's also a college professor. And so, we've sold ourselves short, but that's okay, because the opportunities in the past was, yeah, you're a Caribbean island, you develop tourism, it's what it is. Financials was our second industry. Yeah, we have our, role to play there, but there's all these other sectors that tie into it. We have a fascinating business case that needs to be written. I mean, I see it every day when I go home and I see a new business started, and I think to myself, okay, is that the next Lowe's Pharmacy? Is that the next, Kohl's of Nassau? Is that the next Nassau shop? And, is that the next John Bull? These are brands. They're
So
not
you don't
just
agree?
businesses.
You don't agree with those who say that we are underperforming?
We are performing at the level that that was set in past years. That's our challenge now. In previous years, like I said, your top industry was tourism, your second industry was finances, and you kind of ride that train. The world has shifted now. And so our biggest challenge is, how do we shift to scale those other industries that have been churning along, doing their own little thing? How do we scale that? That's the biggest challenge. And then to do that, you need one, leadership. We don't have a lot of opportunities to groom leadership. And if you think about it, on a political leadership, we're just now entering our first set of like new political leaders. The rest of them were all part of the same crowd, right? We rode that train till the wheels fell off.
Okay.
Now you have to groom new. It's how do you groom new? That's our biggest challenge.
Let us hear from the other lady on the panel here. She is involved in policy and development in Florida. How do you see your home country, the Bahamas, performing?
I am proud to say that I could get home quicker than any one of you. 35 minutes away on the jet. But again, and the feedback in terms of the Bahamas has been extremely positive. I was very blessed and fortunate, Ambassador Jones, to have been in the United States, but in Florida, and specifically South Florida, for, I would say 25 years at this point. And I have certainly understood the different levels of which someone who is coming to the United States, you come as a student or you come for work. And now with myself being in the political arena, I believe it gives me a more holistic approach, or a more strategic approach to understanding specifically what it's going to take to get us to be empowered as a nation economically. And as I said in my introduction, I believe true economic empowerment comes when you empower from the inside out. So I believe it has to be, like Dr. Walker said, centered on an initiative or a mission, one mission at the core, if you're following me strategically. So we have a wheel or something that we'd like to be placed in motion. And so that mission would sit at the core, and then the individual spokes of the wheel, like she mentioned, family, community, education, politics certainly is important, because as politicians, we have access to the information, the people, the resources, and the equal distribution of those resources. And then certainly the communications. You are a man in communications and understand how important it is to brand or market all of these amazing qualities that we have as a nation, the sand and sea, the ability to have tourism in any way, shape, and form. I truly believe that it could be exercised in the Bahamas. One example of what I did as a politician or policymaker in the United States, in Miami Gardens, I was able to have, for the very first time, you may be familiar with Jazz in the Gardens, an amazing event drawing about 85,000 people each year to the city of Miami Gardens. As I mentioned, we're the largest African-American city, having about 100 and 16,000 residents. So I made sure that for this particular Jazz in the Gardens, we have it in March of every year, that we had Bahamian vendors there selling authentic Bahamian food. I made sure to extend the invitation to the Deputy Prime Minister and his team. I extended an invitation to the Bahamas media. So Eyewitness News, they were live on the ground at Jazz in the Gardens, having an opportunity to hear from the audience about how important it would be not just to attend Jazz in the Gardens, but to also take advantage of the Bahamas being less than 35 minutes away. So I think there's so many different opportunities for us to tell our stories, but we have to take a holistic economic empowerment viewpoint in order to make sure that we hit all of those important points.
You know, in traveling the United States, I have come across a whole lot of Bahamian intellectuals. They're a dime a dozen all over the United States. And I was looking at some statistics the other day, and in terms of Bahamians in the United States, we're talking about under 60,000 Bahamians there. And they are all contributing well to the development of the United States. And we are concerned about the extent to which we are losing talent and in the Bahamas, and if there is a brain drain. And I just want you to weigh in, all of you, on this perception that there is a brain drain, and we are losing some of our brightest Bahamians to our neighbor, the United States of America. How do you feel about that? Perhaps I can begin with Ed Smith.
Yeah, without a doubt, some of the brightest and the best, because when you look at the opportunities in the U.S., it's endless. It's endless. Dion Ayton, as an example, you know, where he grew up in the Bahamas and played sports, and then all of a sudden he had an opportunity just the other day to sign a multi-million-dollar contract. And once he does something like that, he'll come back to the Bahamas to visit, but that's a citizen that you've basically lost in terms of there's no way for that to happen in the Bahamas, because the opportunity just isn't there. And he's just an example. You can look at Michael Thompson, and the list goes on and on and on. Doctors, and and when you've reached lawyers, etc. When you reach that level and you want to reach higher levels, that opportunity, a lot of those opportunities don't exist in the Bahamas. Bahamas is a place where you call home. You want to sit down and eat a conch snack and enjoy the family, enjoy the beaches. But the opportunities when you want to reach that apex is limited somewhat. And one of the things that we really got to bring under control also is the crime there. When I look at the newspaper on a daily basis and see where some, families and folks, somebody's getting killed, that's not a pretty picture. And so somehow, we got to bring those things under control, whether it requires bringing outside help to help in that regard, to say, how do we control this factor? Because it's a very small country, as we know, 400,000 people.
Outside help?
When I say outside help, when I say outside help, for example, New York, Miami, I mean, where they fight crime.
You have tremendous crime problems in New York and Miami.
Now you're talking millions of
crime all over the region.
But so at least, and I don't know if maybe they do get assistance and advice, but it's something that it has to be, some kind of control. It needs to be put in place, because it's a dangerous proposition for a lot of people when you start thinking, when you can't get out your car and with the threat of somebody robbing you or shooting you or whatever the case may be.
There's a
So
phenomenon
so I do want-
all over our region. But let somebody else chime in here
Yeah,
on the question.
So,
Yes,
so
Mr.
Ambassador
Sanders?
Jones, that's always a difficult question for me, brain drain, right? I don't know if that's a bad thing. I think this gets back to my earlier question where we have to find better ways to tap into our resources that's not there, right? It's hard to tell a Bahamian that's making $700,000 that live abroad to come back home, right? And for that Bahamian, it's very hard to tell, I'm not sure if you heard me, I said it's hard to tell a Bahamian that's making $700,000 abroad to come back home, right? And if that coming back home means that they're gonna get paid maybe 30% or 20% of what they're making in the US. I mean, that's just not gonna happen. Unless you've built up enough wealth where, you're just coming back home because you want to be able to give back. And we see that with a lot of athletes and entertainers and those folks.
But you pay far more taxes. You pay far more taxes in the
Trust me, the tax, even with taxes, I'd still make a way more, or most of us still make a lot more than we would make, at least for those that's much higher up in the in the corporate setting. And I assume that if you're just starting out your career and you're making under $100,000 or something just barely over $100,000, maybe it would even out. But again, this gets back to my point where as a country, we've got to be able to tap in. I don't see anything wrong with us Bahamians being abroad. Because we're gaining the experience that the Bahamas needs. The Bahamas just needs to figure out a way, how do we tap in to get that information back? I think the vast majority of us would be more than willing to freely give advice and direction and whatever is needed for the growth and development of our country. Again, the big problem is that we don't have a vehicle to be able to tap into that, right? You have Bahamians all over the world that's doing incredible things in technology, in medicine, in every industry. How do you tap into that so that we're giving that knowledge to Bahamians? We see with the building of Bahama and these other things that's happening where industries are coming into the Bahamas, but a lot of them are keeping that knowledge internally. People build Bahama and it's mostly people from another country. There's a bunch of skill sets there that could be learned by Bahamians, and tapping into Bahamians that can pass that knowledge on. I look at it more so as knowledge transfer. How do we be able to develop a pipeline to be able to pass knowledge on from what we're doing in the States to be able to give Bahamians some of the insights on how it's being done and how some of those skills that we're learning will help benefit them and projects that they're working on. And until we build that pipeline, people will look at it as a brain drain, but I look at it as an opportunity for the country to really be able to tap into way more resources than they think is available to them.
Dr. Walker, the same question to you. Dr. Walker?
So the challenge is that everybody's right. So we do have a drain, right? Because you have a small population. So if a good portion of your productive labor force is not there, you decrease production. At the same time, it is an opportunity because you can bring back the knowledge that you earned, that you've gained and contribute. So we don't have a system where somebody doesn't permanently reside in the Bahamas to contribute back. That is a challenge. Number two, we also don't have good data for people to make good plans and decisions from an entrepreneurship point of view to come back to the Bahamas to generate their own opportunity. So that's the box I'm in. And I'm not well connected, but I have some connects. And so if I want to return and not just participate in the same old fashioned, but start your own, because that's really what we need. We need people to start their own. It's very limited data to do that. At the same token, we can't compare ourselves to the United States, right? That the United States is a different value proposition in attracting others from around the world, not just us. But it is a sacrifice you will make to live in the United States. Yes, the economic or the actual paycheck you might receive might be far greater. Your options for professional work or even recreational outlets will be far greater. But there's a cost you will pay for that, because the United States is a little bit like a rat race. You will be on a spinning wheel the entire time you're here. Mm-hmm. Let's be clear, okay? Yeah. At the
Yeah.
same time, the Bahamas needs to identify what's the value proposition for someone to return home. It can't just be return home because it's home. You got to
Yeah.
give me a little bit more than that. So if we had a portal or some platform in which the opportunities were posted or ideas of what's coming up, if we had access to data so people can make their own plans, I think you'll find that you can pull people back for different reasons, except for you need to return home.
But as we head into the 50th anniversary of Bahamian independence, there are a lot of people who are not driven by dollars and cents, who are
Right.
not driven by money. They are driven by some other things. And there is no place like home,
I was gonna say,
ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen. I see the city council woman from Miami shaking her head in approval. There's no place like home. And don't we owe it to the Bahamas to do more in terms of educating people here about the quality of life that we
Yeah.
enjoy in the Bahamas? And let me say, I think the quality of life in the Bahamas, I'm not talking about the acquisition of things.
Right.
I'm talking about quality of life that is measured in other ways. It's better in the Bahamas. Wouldn't you agree, Councilwoman?
Yes, as I was listening, I was shaking my head because I kept thinking there is no place like home. And there's no amount of money that can give anyone a live peace of mind. If that was the case, then Steve Jobs would still be with us today. It's interesting when Mr. Saunders spoke about the pipeline, and then Dr. Walker spoke about the value proposition that needs to be offered to the 60,000 plus Bahamians in the United States or abroad. But as she mentioned the word value proposition, I went back to my marketing days and I thought about, we now would have to weigh what the opportunity cost would be. What are we giving up for the value proposition? And I think until that is clear, you have in essence a divide. But what I do know, that what we do have in common as a people, no matter where we are, it is the ability to understand and have a sense of pride for our country. I was born in Princess Margaret Hospital. I make no bones about it. Every single person on this conversation, we still maintain our accents. Having been in this country for longer than I was in the Bahamas per se. But I think it's very important, again, from a strategical point of view, to be able to understand what that trade-off is going to be, to be able to understand clearly what the mission is going to be. Because yes, you do have a pool of intellects, and we are so varied, from politics to any other discipline, to education to ministry. There's a Bahamian everywhere. And just a side note, Bunch Park, which is located in my district in Miami Gardens, is the most Bahamian place in the United States. So yes, you do have a huge amount of Bahamians here. They attend Florida Memorial, St. Thomas University. But again, if we're going to get that value proposition from the Bahamas, we're going to need to weigh it to what that opportunity cost is going to be. Why should we come back? What is the cost of us leaving or giving up? Now, just another point, as I was thinking, and I'll be done. I think it's important about myself in a political arena. And then I think about myself in a professional arena as a businesswoman. Things have to make sense for everyone in terms of business. But then there also has to be a give back. And truly, I believe that's the humane thing that each and every one of us here would like to be able to offer to the Bahamas. How do we give back? What's going to be the ways that we can give back? If it's going to be through mentorship, if it's going to be through creating a new pool of entrepreneurs based on these individual disciplines, I know what I did to be elected as a female in Miami Gardens. I can bring that knowledge back to UB, or as I do now with students in Florida Memorial, I mentor young women to say, I was once in that same chair as a student at Florida Memorial 25 years ago. I didn't think in 25 years I would be one of 7 leading the same city where Florida Memorial is located. So I truly believe each and every one of us here can, in fact, be able to do the same thing based on our disciplines.
Yes?
No,
Dr.
I was going to
Walker,
ask. I'm sorry.
I think Ed Smith wanted to make a contribution here. Ed?
Yeah, no, I just was going to ask the question and put the shoe on the other foot and ask, has the government reached out to bring in Bahamians, professional Bahamians from the U.S. as consultants? Has that ever been tried?
Well, I just wonder, sometimes we wait for the government to reach out. But, there's nothing wrong with you reaching forward and making suggestions and sending your ideas and sending your contributions, even if you send it through the Embassy of the Bahamas or one of the consulate offices, on any suggestions that you might have for development in the Bahamas.
But I know,
was making the point, Dr. Walker, that growth is one thing and development is another. And I want you all to chime in on these two things, growth and development. Moving to the 50th year of independence, some people would suggest that the Bahamas has developed very nicely over the 5 decades, because independence came and met us with a level of development that there was much to be desired. The government at the time had to get about the job of developing the various islands of the Bahamas. And when you look at what has been achieved over the last 50 years, do you think that we've done well, or do you think we have not done well? Dr. Walker?
I think it depends on what area you're asking about. If it's a wholesale question, I think we're fair. We're fair because we followed the natural pattern of what you were supposed to do, right? You didn't just dismantle everything the British set up. You knew where your sweet spot was, what was your cash cow, you invested in that. You knew you had to lay down some infrastructure in all the islands, which is a really big challenge. And I don't think that people really appreciate when you are a country of 700 islands, 18 major ones, you don't build a airport. You don't build a port. You have to build 18. And some islands, you got to build 2 or 3 on the same island. Other countries may not have to, have that same sort of challenge. So what I would be criticism about is that we don't express the challenge we might have because of the geography, because of the history, and then tie it to what achievements we actually did make. So yes, progress was made, undeniably. We are an independent country. We are doing what we need to do. But I don't know if we've laid enough or paid enough attention in the investment of what the future has to hold. And we can get caught up in our crisis, right? So everybody's the pandemic. I'm like, okay, I get it. Yes, it first emerged, it's a crisis. But these things will occur. And so we're still working on building basic infrastructure. That's an ongoing task. Nation building never ends. So at the same time, you have to build infrastructure, which is basic. You have to take care of the needs that are current, as well as you have to project to the future. What I think we've fallen short on is that projection to the future, because we did have to deal with such basic needs. I mean, to get water, electricity, housing to everyone on every island, regardless of their circumstance, is a challenge many even developed countries do not have to face.
But Dr. Walker, what I have found in my conversations with U.S. politicians. I've been to many offices in the Senate, in the Congress, spoken with many politicians and people in government. And I've spoken with a whole lot of people in the diaspora. And I found that they really do not understand the Bahamas. And I'm wondering whether or not we have not done a good job in educating people about what the Bahamas is all about. Because a whole lot of people, even in the diaspora, they look at the Bahamas as being New Providence. They have no consideration for what is happening in the southeastern islands of the Bahamas. I've spoken with American politicians who really do not know about ORTEC in Andros and what it is all about. And so my question to you is this, and all of you perhaps can chime in here. The extent to which we know our country, the Bahamas, and are working for the development of the entire Bahamas. Because we talked about quality of life earlier on, and somebody mentioned crime. And there is absolutely no crime in many islands of our country. In many of them, you have zero crime. And the quality of life is extremely high. Haven't we done a poor job in educating ourselves about our country, the Bahamas?